Took me a second here to figure out how to control the PowerPoint presentation. So good morning. It is a great pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to present part of an ongoing European project that addresses some of the issues that Maria pointed out in terms of our priorities. I need to recognize my colleagues, Ms. DROUTSA, Dr. DASKALAKI, and Mr. KONTOYANNIDIS, working on this European Indirect Med project called SESBA-MED. And as you see here, some keywords on the issues we're trying to address: sustainability of the built environment. And in terms of, great. So we will carry on from here. The issues we're trying to address in a holistic manner, and that's the key part of the problem, is looking at the various issues. Some may focus on energy, some may focus on environment, very closely related. Economy and financial issues are always there. The urban environment as a whole, society though, and social need to also be at the center stage. Now this is a plethora of issues, and in a holistic approach you may not have the option to say, I'm going to be focusing on energy, and that raises the expectations and that raises the level of complexity. Now, to address sustainability issues, we need to have some kind of indicators in order to quantify and in order to be able to compare. You may be very well familiar with energy use intensities, how much energy per unit floor area we consume. You may be very well aware of other indicators, emissions, how many kilograms of CO2 equivalent and so forth we emit, waste, and then, of course, they come social issues, unemployment, they come other indicators, how many people, how many residents use public transportations. Again, a plethora of indicators that we somehow need to put together in order to be able to address this general complex sustainability issues in a manageable way. That would help us in the decision-making process. And since we can look at the top-down process of having some selected key performance indicators, the most important ones, that, for example, are being set at an international level with Agenda 2030 by the UN. Then, of course, we have more, and we add some more in terms of some additional indicators to the key performance ones that we have at the European level. There may be some more at the national level. You keep going down to your region, and you keep coming down, for example, at the city level, where you, at every step, you add more. You add more indicators that start becoming this approach more relevant to your needs. For example, the city of Belgrade, taking into account all the other indicators, may also have to give focus on some specific issues. And of course, that adds to the complexity, that adds to the need to have something flexible that in terms of addressing all the issues still can be tailored to fit the needs at the local level. Because we do need to think globally, but at the end we need to act locally in order to be successful. So in this process, why did we try to engage in this work? Because we need to have a common language in order to understand each other. We need to have a common perception, understanding of the key sustainability issues. We need to fix some performance targets that would be based on quantitative indicators that we can accurately reliably measure and verify in order to be able to address the sustainability issues, to be able to monitor these indicators in order to see how successful are we in terms of progressing, and exchange information so that we can learn from each other best practices, so that we can see how we can then similarly adapt some successful practices in our area. And while we're doing this, we need to be able to do it at a multi-scale level, starting from the buildings, going to bigger areas, neighborhoods, part of the city, the whole city. And in this process, we need some concrete steps in order to help us in the decision-making process. All this is a good starting point. How do I make it, though, applicable in my city, in my area, that may have some distinct features, may have some distinct needs? So the idea of adaptability to the local priorities is a must, and also to have something that would not be commercial, that would be open, accessible, so that would also bring down the cost of implementation, and finally develop that sense of local ownership, that this is my method, this is my tool, this is my local approach that can be adapted and tailor-made. So what we did, and in this part of the project, is to develop this transnational, meaning engaging different teams coming from different countries. Multi-criteria, meaning it involves all this plethora of indicators for addressing all the sustainability issues in order to be able to assess and rate it for buildings and for neighborhoods, and to support with this with a decision-making process so that we can increase the quality of public buildings in our neighborhoods. Now, of course, talking about larger scale, that increases the challenges, that increases the level of complexity, but also, looking at the positive side, the opportunities that we have in order to implement. How did we do this? We didn't start from scratch. There has been already a lot of work, and so we reviewed existing public assessment methods and systems, altogether about 14 of them. So we had that know-how taking in. We also consulted with local committees, experts in different countries. So that involved and engaged, as you see, 6 European countries that engaged in the process. We also had opportunities to engage and exchange ideas and see how we advanced our work with experts from other European projects, so working together. There was dialogue with the citizens in the different participating countries, and also taking into account what is an ongoing work at the European level, developing the indicators for the building scale, residential and offices, called levels. So this is an ongoing European process to have a uniform approach at building scale, to also have an opportunity to integrate these indicators in the current work. The structure of the method, so how this is set up, it evolves, as you see, the different levels. All the issues, sustainability issues, 7 of them, described in the different categories, then matched with specific indicators that quantify the different criteria that we need to address. For example, on the issue of energy, we may look at how much non-renewable energy we consume. The indicator usually for that may be the thermal or electrical energy use intensity, so how much energy, kilowatt hours per floor area square meter. Another indicator in the economy and the activity would be, with regard to the criteria, employment. So an indicator of your percentage of employment rate of residents may be another example. Here's the big picture in terms of the different, and remember we have 2 scales, buildings and neighborhoods. So the issues At the building scale, the neighborhood scale, 7 of them addressing sustainability. 20-something categories. You see there's a difference at building scale and the neighborhood scale, and at the core, a good number of indicators, some of which, 16 of them, are the minimum, the key performance indicators that as a minimum we need to always address. From there on, you can build and you can add to what you may need to sufficiently describe your case. So at the core, every time we look at the different issues, sustainability issues, we have at the core the minimum number of indicators, 16 of them. And additional ones that one can have a different combination if they want to place more emphasis, in more detail, in more depth, some specific issues. The generic, and here you see the flag of the UK, it's just meaning that the generic method and system is set up in English. It doesn't mean that we had a participant from the UK, because this is an indirect Mediterranean program, so it involves countries around the Mediterranean. From there on, you see the national frameworks, starting from the generic, start tweaking a little bit and getting in more emphasis on what is more applicable at a national level, respecting that we all address the number of sustainability issues, either at the building or neighborhood scale. And of course, what gives you flexibility is to include indicators representative of your national situation and priorities. All of them, though, have the same KPIs, key performance indicators, the 16 minimum that we all need to do in order to address this issue. This information, though, goes into a building or neighborhood passport. What does a passport do? It allows you to cross borders. So that means then we have a minimum amount of information in a document that we call building passport, neighborhood passport, that allows the flexibility to compare, because all this then are the same indicators with the same methodology, with the same approach being calculated by everyone, so that the results are comparable. Behind the tool, there is a lot of work at national level that has been done. Every system that you may be aware, and there are various commercial ones available in the market, have this scaling for rating and giving a score to the different numerical values of the indicators. Imagine how good are 100 kilowatt hours per square meter compared with an unemployment rate of 11%. How do you scale and give points to this? So the idea here is for every value of the indicator to define between a scale of 0 and 5 on a national level what is considered minimum in terms of what the law, the legislation, the minimum requirements may be applicable in your country, that's 0, up to 5, which is the best practice, the ideal, maybe even the target. In that case, of course, you can understand that sometimes the numerical value of an indicator increasing gets you to higher is better, in a situation where you will actually expect to get a higher grade if you score better if you use more renewables, for example. So a low percentage of renewables, minimum. In Greece, for example, we have 60% a minimum requirement for your domestic hot water needs from renewables. That would be 0, up to going to a combi system or a combi plus system, where you use more and more renewables for all your HVAC. That would give you a higher score. On the other hand, though, you may have lower is better. So you see your linear correlation here would be 0, starting from a high energy performance per unit floor area of, say, 200 kilowatt hours per square meter, getting down to nearly 0 energy buildings. For example, score 5 when you reach an NZEP and your EUI gets down to 20, 30 kilowatt hours per square meter, for example. And again, all this information in terms of the KPI go into the passport to have the metrics. The big picture is for the methodology and the approach that we have used is that we have developed a transnational multi-criteria system. The general concept, the general framework is available in English. You select your criteria, you set up your benchmarks, you assign your weights so that you can adapt and make and tailor-make a different national version. And you see the different countries, the different cities where this approach has been tailor-made and tested with pilot projects, including one next door in Zagreb, Croatia. And the end result is to develop a city tool, your tool, the one that is applicable, tailor-made, that contains sufficient information, sufficient detail of what your city, for example, considers priorities for sustainability. Respecting the minimum requirements, then that gives the sense of ownership. This is my tool, this works for me, for my city. It has a lower housing cost, easy to handle the more complex sustainability issues. And of course, as a first step, as soon as you make this approach, it helps you get organized. Although that may sound trivial, everybody's organized, this is not true, especially when you're talking with cities, with municipalities, where a lot of information is available, but it's scattered in different departments. Now, all of a sudden, in this process, in this method, helps you collect all the information together, get organized, do the housekeeping, identify the gaps in order to be able to make a successful process towards sustainability. A couple of slides for the tool, and we are ready to complete this presentation. As I said before, the tool doesn't really help you, in a sense, make everything in terms of the calculations, but it prepares you to set up a good action plan. The first step, it is to set your priorities for the different issues. So at the municipality, you decide that for our city, the order of priorities from 1 to 3 for the different sustainability issues are weighted, so that from there on, you can start selecting your indicators. What you cannot unselect from this list are the ones identified as a key performance indicator. We have made an agreement. This is the minimum. So these are locked, these are fixed, but the rest, your city, for example, in your area, in your neighborhood, you can give more or less emphasis with different indicators based, for example, on the availability of information. That may be one of your criteria. So you can select and unselect so that you all of a sudden now making the first basic step of adapting the general framework to your needs, your characteristics. There, you also have the weighting factors. If you let the method automatically redo the math, all the indicators, depending on how many you leave active in your project, in your city, in your area, will be automatically distributed. But there you can intervene and say, well, I still want this indicator that describes and addresses a very important sustainability issue for my city, for my area, to have a higher weight. So then you can go in and adjust this in order to give it a higher weighting factor. For each indicator now, you get some background information, support in terms of what it is. Maybe you don't have all the expertise in-house to address all the variability of sustainability, but what you need to give as a minimum is to enter the calculated value of your indicator. For example, how much energy, non-renewable, you use in your buildings, in your area, your renewable energy resources, what a percentage and so forth. And also where you can intervene is to adjust the benchmark scale for the specific project. Already, the national versions that we said that have been developed include this benchmark, so you're ready to go. But your area may have some specific characteristics. Maybe It is an area, part of the city, with historic buildings. So what do? Do you use benchmark CUIs, energy use intensities, that cannot really fit the needs of historic buildings because you don't have that much flexibility? There, you can then adjust these benchmarks in order to have a more realistic score for your area. The results now that you get graphically, once you complete and you go through all your indicators, it gives you an idea of your different areas with the different percentages, and you can start having scenarios. What if I need to do more in the energy, in the environmental issues? What if I need to place more emphasis on the social aspects and so forth? So once you do different scenarios, you can look at the breakdown. You can see at this spider diagram that you ideally like to proceed to approach the top of the different issues in your scale. And at the end, of course, you're gonna have some supporting information. There is an already almost completed the pilots in 9 Mediterranean cities, including Zagreb in Croatia. There is a very detailed multilingual educational material, including Croatian, that is going to be available online, open and free access to everyone interested. There are educational seminars that have been completed in every participating country, but there will be courses. So that might be of interest to some of you. And the toolkit altogether, again, open source and for free distribution, because the idea is to get cities, to get municipalities to take this available method and tool, adapt it to the local needs, and start using it. Start using it in order to support all stages of the decision-making process, from the early steps down to the final plan and implementation, because by setting up the method in a clear, concise manner and your indicators, you'll be able to monitor implementation and see how well you actually are addressing the different sustainability issues in your area, and the successful monitoring in order to be able to reiterate and proceed with placing more emphasis on where you may be falling short and trying to improve. The final slide, you may have some success stories. You may already have done wonderful things in your area, in your city. There is an ongoing international European competition, not only for Mediterranean countries, but open to all European countries, that you may be interested to submit your good practices, your good examples, the ones that you have already implemented or the ones that you are planning. It is for small cities, for big cities, for existing projects, for plan or design phase. All the information, as you see, is available at this specific area of the CESBA.eu project. The deadline, mid-February. So there is still time to submit your showcase, your good practices, your good examples. And that concludes the presentation. If there are any questions, it may be a good time to maybe start a little bit of a discussion. But thank you very much for your attention.